meeting live on YouTube. Didn't I say so? I think you did.
Are we broadcasting? Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to see you all. We've got some apologies. I know that there's one from Councillor Brian Wildman and Mark Chung. And so we'll move on for to declare matters of interest, a declaration of interest from anybody from the minutes. And yeah.
Can I ask what happened to all the numbers? Just
sorry, I can't hear.
Can I ask what happened to all the numbers that we brought that never got put on pens?
Yeah, some of the numbers have been put on pens. The rest are actually in storage. The numbering system was based on a new number system, so not all of them could be installed, and it's just a matter of time before the rest are installed when we've got suitable locations for them.
Anything about the minutes? It was quite a long time ago, this meeting. It was Tuesday the 14th of June. The last meeting had to be unfortunately cancelled because we only had a couple of the councillors here due to illness and such like. So unfortunately, that was our last meeting. But could I have a proposer for those minutes? Kevin, you'll propose. And could we have a seconder? Thank you, Pat. Election of cooperative members. Have we got anybody who would like to be a cooperative member? Obviously, this will probably be our last allotment meeting until after May, when obviously we'll have a new town council in operation. However, that doesn't mean that we can't co-opt you on tonight.
Had we had a meeting last June?
Exactly, you would have been there. Yes. So are we all happy? Yeah, so have we got a proposer that Bill becomes, yeah, and there you go. Okay, now the public forum, it's just for information, and it's to consider questions, statements and petitions from members of the public who are welcome to the meeting and have a total of 15 minutes to make their representations to the committee. Hopefully it won't be 15 minutes, but you've got 15 minutes, and I believe Colin has asked to speak. Yep.
Yeah.
Colin, would you mind putting your microphone on? Thank you.
Yeah. Last time I was here, I mentioned to you about the renaming part of Notts Lane allotments in respect to the fact that John Ogden left them in his will. Well, further to that, I've done a little search for his will, and it appears I went on the probate office and he didn't leave a written will, and a grant of probate was issued instead. So his next of kin could administer his verbal will, and that explains why in my deeds pack, I explained at the time, in my deeds, I had a copy of the deeds for the transfer of ownership to John Ogden, and a handwritten note saying that he had left them in 1962 to the Colne Corporation. Well, this grant of probate is in 1962, so that ties in perfectly with the handwritten note that I've got, and that's why there is no will and you won't be able to find one anywhere. So I have copies of those things to pass on at the end. Well, I'll give them to you, can't I? So there's the other one, the other piece of paper says basically there is no written will. That's, you can't download it, you can't have it. It costs £1.50, but it's money well spent. It took 10 minutes. The other thing I wanted to ask or talk about or discuss or pose a question was to do with the rest of the site behind Notts Lane, to the west of Notts Lane. The southerly part of it is the John Ogden legacy, and the rest of it is in different ownership. So originally Morrow Developments owned all of it, and they've sold off big chunks of it and small parcels of it to various people. So they've sold the far west sites that border gardens. People have been allowed to buy extensions of their own garden, and right behind Notts Lane, some people that I've been on that site for huge amounts of years, 50, 60, 70 years, they've allowed those people to buy those plots too. But there still is a residue of plots that are owned by Morrow who they won't rent them out, and they won't consider selling them to as a block. I asked them, I emailed them last year and said, on the behalf of the community, could I buy them? And their response was, at the moment, we haven't decided what we're going to do with them, because we are talking to the town council regarding buying the road. And once we've concluded those discussions, we might then think about a different outcome. So my proposal is, or my question is, and I've got a little map to show you where I'm talking about. My printer's not working, so I have to sort of colour them in a little bit. But if you would like to take on and pass them on, then it'll make more sense than if you can see what I'm talking about. There we are. So on this little map, I've marked in the part that was the John Ogden legacy, which is, I've plotted the sizes on the original deed onto the bottom part of your one, which is the southerly part of the site. And then the sort of L-shaped yellow part is the roadway, the access that the town council is purchasing or leasing or coming to an access agreement about. And then the residual part that's marked Morrow is the residual part that is nobody, it appears that nobody's got a claim on it. Now there are 3 plots that are not marked in that site. The farthest one north that abuts Lay Street Green Space, they're in negotiations for over a year about buying that plot. Originally the house that backs onto it, that was originally their allotment, and they thought they'd bought it when they bought the house, but effectively they didn't. When they realised they didn't, they vacated that allotment because they don't want to do anything that isn't legal. And the other 2 plots, which are further south, they have ownership of those, and they say that they own them outright. So they're well kept and cared for. So my question is, could the town council investigate purchasing or leasing the rest of that residential area, you know, the bit that's left, so it can be brought back into use? Because there are constantly people asking me about it. Now, why they ask me is because all that land once belonged to where I live. And so people still think, because for 550 years you went to the farm where I live to try and rent a plot, and people still do. There's somebody in September that came and asked, could they rent one of the overgrown plots? Eventually, I asked somebody else that I knew that has a plot, and they were thinking about giving it up, and they've actually just passed on the ownership to them outright.
All right. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I think with the legacy and the change of the name, we did discuss this at one of our previous meetings, and we discovered that it had been sold rather than bequeathed. So I don't know whether you want to...
After you came to the last meeting, I approached Pendle Borough Council with an inquiry as to whether what happened when the land was transferred to Pendle, and their legal department said that it was actually purchased by Pendle, not bequeathed. So that's what I brought back to the committee and what the committee discussed at that time. Now, we don't know how much they purchased it for. It could have been a relatively nominal amount, but the fact that it was purchased sort of put a bit of a halt on proceedings to actually rename the allotments at that stage. We will be discussing the land purchases in South Valley and Notts Lane later on, but it doesn't include the areas of land. Sorry, I didn't quite gather which areas of land it was when I was looking at the map. Maybe we can clarify that later on. But really, all we're focusing on at this point in time is the carriageway that provides access to the South Valley plots. I know Mara Developments do have several other holdings, including plots next to the houses, which haven't been sold to the residents, and also the area at the bottom. Just from brief recollection, I think there would be, I mean, it's not that we couldn't investigate it, but there would be issues that we'd have to settle first before, if the committee or the council decided it wanted to proceed in that manner, there would be issues to settle. The first thing, I think, on one of the plots, there may be disputed ownership. And with the area at the bottom of the plot, I understand that there is quite a large culvert. I've never actually seen it because it's rather wild and overgrown at the bottom. But our main focus was to actually purchase the right to use the access track, so that we could then release plots that we've already got but can't let on South Valley. So we already have a stock of plots on South Valley that we need to let, which we can't because we haven't got the access rights.
Yes, Pat?
We were told many years ago, well, I was, I've been on this committee since its inception. Good word for tonight. We were told that that bottom part of the land that's a culvert is dangerous, that we shouldn't go near it, that we don't need it, we shouldn't want it, we should just leave it as it is. But I don't think that's right. We shouldn't do that if it's dangerous. And also, can we find out if the council have bought anything, can we find out for certain that they have and when they bought it and what they paid for it, hopefully? Because it's all right being told that, oh no, it belongs to the council now, just because one guy says it does.
Which plot do you mean?
I'm talking about when he started, I can't remember, it's on this piece of paper, I think.
Can I help?
I don't know.
mean,
I don't.
Are we talking about the bequest?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, many years ago, people thought that land behind their house gave me the house, and a lot of people in Col think they've got an allotment that belongs to the house, and they're finding out that they can't sell it off because it's not theirs.
So basically, you want us to make sure that whose land it is and whether we've got some sort of right to purchase it. Yeah. We'll put that on another agenda. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just clear up a point about the location of where the culvert is? So Maro have a site that has planning permission on it, which is at the end, well, it's just off Leigh Street. That's the part that has the massive culvert in it, and not the larger allotment site. There is a watercourse that runs through the allotment, which comes from a spring, and most of the people that are on there are used to it and have dealt with it for years. The large culvert runs underneath the gardens of most of the houses that are in Grindlestonehurst.
Okay, thank you for that. Was there anybody else that had asked to speak tonight?
Yeah, I just want to know if I'm on plot 23 at Alpine Courts, and man's the only one that has a tap on it. It weren't put in by yourselves, it was put in by a fella called Ken who owned it, well, who had them when they were all four. And apparently I've been told it's a shared path and a shared tap, which for the last, I think it's 6 years I've on it, they've just come on and used the tap and blah, de blah, de blah. But they're not just coming on using my tap. Hiya, Adrian. I've been told that this coming on sowing wood and other bits of stuff on my plot. When I went on holiday, they took me strawberries because they didn't want the slugs to eat them. So I want to know if that isn't a communal tap, can it be moved or be taken off or left where it is, but they have to use the taps that's on the path? Because I'm paying for a plot.
And I know that Eugene is going to discuss this. We might as well discuss it now. Yes, is that all right? Yeah.
Yes, you're quite right. It is the only plot that we've got which has actually got a tap on, which does make it awkward for existing plot holders, or the existing plot holders yourself, in terms of using your allotment. Because of that, what I'm proposing to the committee is that we look at relocating that path. And I've done a small map showing the location of the taps on Alkin Courts allotment site. Most of the taps run up the far path, but there is actually a feed to plot 23. At this moment in time, we've actually cut off the supply to 23, but if the committee agree, what I would like to do is arrange for that supply to be diverted onto the main path that goes across the site halfway up, and locate the new tap location as near as we can to plot 22, because that will be in the middle of that path, but on the not on the culvert side, but on the top side of that. So as it stands at the moment, it is the only plot that has got a tap on it. I can understand that might cause nuisance for the existing plot holder. It's not an area that they can cultivate whilst they're on that plot. And I think there wouldn't be too much difficulty in relocating the path. There will be some cost, and there will be probably about a week's work, I would expect, for the lensman, maybe a bit less than that, to actually reinstate a new tap near to the plot 22 on the cross path.
So the workmen can get on to do what they need to do. I put a new gate on bottom, so that we're in that entrance now. So I've done it so that the workmen need to come on. It's more easier access for them to come on and move the thing, as long as obviously the building all back in.
Well, that seems to be the most sensible thing, really, to move to. Well, it's obviously being switched off now, the tap. It's going to be moved onto the communal path, and there should be no more problems. The plot. Yeah, I've got to ask the other committee members if they will agree with that. And
can I just clarify?
Yeah.
Can I just clarify? It still remains a communal path, because we can't restrict access onto the plots at the top. Yes, that would remain communal. Yeah.
Yeah, you mean your plot is just your plot? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Can I just say, I've been up there and looked, as I say, I've been on this committee 16 years and never known that was a communal path. It's just a path in somebody's allotment. The communal path goes across the top and down between Adrian's and Marie's. Now, as far as I'm concerned, when you've got an allotment, it's yours, you pay for it, you do what you want on it within reason, but you don't trespass on somebody else's plot. So as people are using the internal path on Marie's allotment as a communal path, she shouldn't be paying for it. She shouldn't be paying for an allotment for herself, should she? I don't think so. I don't think the way it's.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's moving the tap, to me, it should be taken away, full stop. It doesn't belong to the allotments. No, it never did. It was always Ken's, he should have taken it with him when he went, well, he's not that sort of a fella. It's not for everybody to use. It's trespassing. As far as I'm concerned, it's trespassing. You do not go onto somebody else's allotment. You don't go and sow your wood upon there. You don't take the fruits of our neighbours, and you don't leave water running so that the vents are wet through. You just go on.
Yeah.
So, okay, move the tap, but where are you going to put it?
Would you like to? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it would go on the plot side of the middle path. There's quite a significant stone chip path which runs between next to plot 22. If we can, as close as to that as possible, because that would be more central. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wouldn't be within the plot.
So it'd be outside the plot.
So it's outside.
Yeah, yeah. You happy with that, Pat?
I think for tackling Legionella and stuff like that, it's probably best to install a new tap there, because otherwise we'd have a section of pipe which didn't go anywhere, so you'd get more stagnant water in that pipe. So it's better to actually have it in use and relocate the tap.
Yep. Good, 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 good. Right, okay. So next is, oh, is there anybody else who wants to speak? No. Allotment, please.
If you say that little path in our allotment is not a communal path, so nobody should be on it apart from 3. I said that.
I think yes,
Yeah.
there's a section of path to the top and down the far side which has to be communal because that's access, but actually paths within the plot are the plot holders then to maintain.
Okay, can we sorry, move on now. Yeah, yeah.
My wife and myself have been on that plot for 14 years, and we've been on it since it was created from one bigger one. And the understanding has always been that the tap that is on those 4 allotments, which happens to be on Marie's position, is a communal one. And there's been a very pleasant atmosphere between the owners or the renters of the allotments, and there's been a free and easy understanding. Marie obviously doesn't like the tap being on her land, which, daft as it sounds, at one time I would have done a swap because I quite like the idea of having the tap so handy, but that's a different thing. But definitely the access has always been on the understanding that it is for the 4 allotments. When I heard that the proposal of cutting that tap off, my biggest fear was that that's all very well, but on the understanding that a tap was going to be put at the bottom of those allotments. Now I've actually gotten a hose pipe out and used the water's off, of course, but just to measure how far you'd have to have a a hose pipe along. It's quite a main thoroughfare, is that path, and it would cause quite a lot of problems if all four of us had hose pipes going to the other main path. So I'm quite happy for the path. For the tap to be moved, but I wouldn't be happy if the tap was just cut off and no replacement was put. I think it would be quite awkward.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. So I think we've agreed that the tap is going to be moved, relocated, and your plot is going to be purely for yourself. And hopefully everybody on Alkin Coates will be okay with that decision. No. Yeah. I'm sure no. Yeah. Hopefully things will improve now.
To get something right, you know, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about that. I've never known this to be that part belongs on the 20, whatever it is, it wasn't even that long ago when I came on. Things have changed so much, it's all hearsay. And people are listening to that and it's causing problems. I think we've now got rules and regulations. I think in that book we should have if we're settling on the numbers now, we should have that in the room. We should have where all the taps are and everything. And telling people you do not trespass. You use the communal areas, everybody can do it, but you look to your own allotment and leave everybody else alone. When I've been listening to some of the things that are happening to her, she brought Rita Sophie's last year. She left it on night, came back the morning after, everything was gone.
So hopefully that will all now stop and your allotment can be secured. And obviously we need to make sure that everybody on the Alkin Coates allotment site knows that that's no longer a communal area so that they don't try to come in. Okay, so that seems to be the sensible way forward. Okay. But thank you for drawing attention to that. No. Can I have a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder? I don't think cooperative members can. Yeah. No, I'm very sorry, Bill. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, allotment fees. This is to consider a recommendation from FES that the allotment fees should be increased to 40 pence per square metre for Colne residents and 50 pence per Colne metre or square metre for non-residents, and it to be effective in October the 2024. I don't agree that we should put up the fees. However, if I let other people talk.
With a plot, still well, I don't think you will.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else would like to comment?
To some of the bigger areas, Skipton and Preston, it seemed, Preston, it seems relatively high. And do we pay a £50 fee at the beginning now?
Yes, people that are new allotment holders, they have to pay £50 in order that the sites can be cleared when they go in. and perhaps needing to be cleared when they go out. So we do have that additional charge, which we actually introduced of £50 rather than putting the plot price up.
Do they get that back?
No, they don't get that back. No, but they go into the allotment rental with their eyes open, knowing that that's what they've got to pay. Yes, of course you can.
Just to give a bit of background on this, I was requested to do a report for FES on fee charges, because I think it's obviously good practice that we review the level of fees periodically, which is why I did the report in January to FES, who considered that report and request that the allotment committee consider the potential change in the fees from 36p to 40p and from 47p to 50p for people who live outside the current town council barriers. Generally speaking, the level of fees need to reflect the costs of the allotment services, and since well, over the last few years, certainly this year, the costs have increased quite significantly. Many of the other allotment associations or councils are aiming to try and get their cost for allotments down to cost neutral. I think generally, or certainly my understanding since starting with Cornwall Town Council, was that the town council was quite happy to cover the costs of staffing, the staffing resource for the allotments, but that the understanding was that the costs of the allotments would be paid for really by plot holder contributions. And at one stage it was sort of like 15,000 for one and 15,000 for the other. But I think certainly more recently with plot increases, with inflation and the work that's been required, we've spent actually quite significantly more on allotments. The other thing that was brought up at an area committee meeting of allotment officers, that there were some issues with with councils providing allotments to people who live outside the area. And generally speaking, people who live outside the Cornwall Town Council boundaries can apply for an allotment, but they are considered as second priority in terms of the people who live within the Cornwall Town Council boundaries would come first. It was suggested to me that still remained a problem in terms of our lettings, though I haven't actually gone through the 1908 Act to see where the problem arises. But in the 1908 Act, it suggests that the council makes provision or adequate provision for allotments within its authority. And I think there potentially could be an argument that if someone who gets an allotment and who lives outside the area, if they maintain that allotment, then if we've got other people on the waiting list, potentially we're depriving those other people on the waiting list within the town council boundary from having a plot. So there's potentially a conflict there. I haven't looked in great detail at the Act, so I couldn't actually detail that or be more precise on that. But that is something that we perhaps need to be aware of and look into further. Since, well, expenditure last year on allotments was £14,700. Expenditure this year on allotments could be approaching £43,000. So there's quite a significant increase in expenditure just since last year. Some of the areas where that is shown in terms of barriers and fencing, previously we budgeted for £400 for that. We're now spending £6,000 on that. For clearing and skips, previously we've spent £300 on that. This year we're looking to spend about £5,000. Part of that was some asbestos clearance and treatment for pests on a plot, but that quite significantly affected what we needed to spend this year. Trees, whilst we budgeted for 3,500 this year, we've actually spent 1,500 to date, but that's still an increase on the £600 that we spent the previous year. Repair and maintenance cost would have previously been covered by other budget headings, so there's nothing in that for previous years, but this year that's £7,600. So additional costs over that period of time are about the additional costs that we're looking at spending, I think, is about £18,800 this year, just roughly, if I've got my figures right there, which is significantly more given that we haven't increased plot fees for quite a while. And I think really what it comes down to is really at some point in time, we're going to have to decide, are we going to spend at the current level of spending on allotments, or are we going to reduce what we're spending on allotments to keep in line with the budget allocation for allotments? If we're going to keep that ratio of the town council paying for the staffing resource and the plot holders paying for the money that's actually spent on the allotments, but that is up to committee members to decide. The suggested 4p rise by the FES does reflect 5% increase, I think, in terms with inflation. It may be worth considering at some point, if not today, that we do look at when we are going to increase plot fees, because unless we're going to limit the budget, they will have to increase at some point, and whether that it would be fairer to have that some of the areas actually link it to the consumer price index, so that they will do an increase in line with whatever the consumer price index is that year. Obviously, we have to give 12 months notice of any fee increase, and I think there is reasonable concern, or there is reason to be concerned, that we could be in a situation if we don't address the fee levels, that we could find ourselves with a 12-month delay before we can increase fees to cover costs which are already increasing and have done this year quite significantly.
Any comments?
The three allotment owners we've got, or what do you think about that?
From the last increase, 21 to 35, 38, 36, sorry. It was a massive rise.
Yeah.
We must have a lot of things on the altogether. And why should we be poverty, as we are doing, when we can manage quite well as we are?
I don't mind either way. We pay for water as well, don't we? So I can't really, I don't know how many square meters my lot is, so.
Well, obviously, as an allotment renter, you don't particularly want the rent in water. But as Julie has explained, I would imagine if I was on the council, I wouldn't want the allotments to be causing a debt to the council. So if X amount of money is spent in a year by the council on the allotments, then I think it's only fair that it's recuperated from the people who have the allotments. The one thing I would ask is, can the allotment organisation not spend as much as, although I'm sure it's has been spent as been needed.
So if you do what it was like 16 years ago,
I've got a lot of probably heavy extra, then the council struggle and then they'll end up losing the allotments.
Yeah, we wouldn't lose. Yeah.
It wouldn't be fair for people who are paying rates in the town. If they were subsidising the allotment holders. So if the town got an allotment, which I can consider my own while I'm paying for it,
then I suppose if prices go up, then I'm the one and the other end.
Bill?
On Temple Street, we have no facility whatsoever. Nothing, no electric, no water, no toilets, no Wi-Fi, nothing. So I don't see why we are all in Temple Street should have our prices put.
Kevin, do you have any comments?
But do we charge the same for dry allotments as wet allotments? All the same.
The rate per metre is the same for all allotments, the 36p per metre. The two sites,
Water on tap.
the two sites that have water pay the cost of the water supply or the water usage. So Basil Street and Alkin Courts both have water supplies, which the plot holders pay a divided portion for.
One thing that does concern me is that we seem to have spent quite a lot more money than I thought we had spent. So perhaps we might need to go through and see where we could economise and just make sure that our spending is in line with what we've actually got. Because sometimes we might think, oh, that's a great plan, that's a good project, let's go ahead. But is it necessary? And I think perhaps that's what we need to do as a committee, and decide whether that can be better.
Yes, when it actually went to FES, and we looked at previous year's expenditure for allotments, it did appear that it was quite low, the amount that had been spent for quite a while. There was like a big increase, and then it went down again for a few years. And I think mainly what's happened is because we've not spent on certain things in previous years, it's then suddenly come to a halt, and it's been necessary work that we've had to do in order just to get the plots back. I mean, there was a lot of clearances, a lot in barriers and fencing. But then if you've replaced fencing this year, then, you know, if you've done so much of it, then there shouldn't be as much to do next year or the year after, possibly. So
yeah, that was my concern. I was thinking, well, how have we suddenly gone from £300 to 7,000 for basically the same sort of material? But obviously I know that prices for wood has shot up.
Material prices have gone up quite considerably, which will be some of it. But I think mainly it was mainly due to work that we needed to do, because maybe we hadn't done enough in previous years.
Would our budget have rolled over?
It's in previous years, or since I've kind of worked here, I have been trying to roll elements of the budget forward, which would normally be repairs and maintenance, maybe barriers and fencing, and probably skips, because that kind of thing is always needed with allotments anyway. And so if you haven't spent in 1 year, I have tried to roll it over to the next. However, next year, I think you have got a reduced budget for allotments next year compared to this year's anyway, but more in line with previous years.
Yes, yeah, fair enough.
And they have said that they don't want to carry anything forward for any of the budgets apart from the ones that where there's actually committed expenditure in there.
And that can be a bit awkward in a way, because then you end up with the fact of spending that money, whereas maybe you want to roll it over in order to spend it on something that is larger, And so it is a difficult one to just have that cut-off time. But
I think with all costs going up
mm,
and the fact that we are taking on additional things, and so it has been difficult really budget wise. They haven't increased as much as in inflation, so really in order to carry on doing what we're doing, we're losing out, so we have to find that sort of budget from somewhere. So it's I think it was a conscious decision from the chair of FES that he actually said, I don't think we should carry budgets forward unless there's already committed expenditure in there.
mhm. Thank you. So what do we do? I mean, in these economic times when people are trying to maybe grow their own food, do we want to put additional costs onto people? I know that we've got a number of vacant sites that we should really be trying to push, and then that would give us extra revenue. How much revenue are we losing because of plots that aren't rented?
I mean, there's several areas where plots aren't rented. There is the plots on South Valley, which we've held letting because of the access arrangements. And there are other plots, Broken Banks, which has proven quite difficult to let, certainly a couple of the plots on there. But the actual rent loss in terms of pot fleas is probably quite negligible. I think just off the top of my head, you would probably raise something like about £10,000, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, in plot fees per year. And I think the amount that the vacant plots have cost you are probably less than about £500-700 worth. Even, to be honest, I don't even think it's that, because you're talking, other than the South Valley plots, which are quite large, the other plots, you're talking 150 square meters, maybe 5 or 6 plots at 150 square meters at 36p per meter. Plus you've got the reduced rate plot on Alkin Coats, which we're using for Cone in Bloom, which is negligible as well. So I don't think the vacancies obviously is an issue. It's a loss of income and should be of concern, but I don't think that it's not the vacancies that is the problem. It's the general level of rents on allotments is low per meter, and so even if you increase it quite significantly by the number of p per meter, I think for every 1p you increase your rents, you only get £500 in additional income. That's presuming you don't have people giving backward on their plots because they can't afford the rents in the first place. So if you were to increase the rents by the 4p suggested, you'd have an extra £2,000. And given the difference between last year's spending and this year's spending, it will help it, but it won't account to it. So I think obviously there is going to be whatever's decided in terms of the fee level, the actual spend level on allotments will have to be limited, which will mean that we'll have to look much more closely at what is essential work and what isn't. We've tried to do work as people have requested it, because obviously we want people to be happy with the plots and the sites that they have. But I think if we're having to be more strict, then we won't be able to do as much as we have done, like new fencing work, like new paths, like new taps and things like that.
Yeah.
Regarding money being tight, I'll be 80 this year. Yeah. But a letter from the government saying I'm entitled to an extra. In your ears, right? 25 pence a week. Yeah, what am I going to spend?
Thank you for your contribution.
I'm just sort of thinking out of the box here. Now, we're sort of saying that we're not going to have that much money. And I'm saying I don't really want the allotment holders to have their rents increased. What happens though if we asked certain sites, if they need to have some sort of fencing or gravel put down, and there's sort of more of a collective, no, you're, you're, but,
I've lived the path myself.
yeah, but they didn't contribute to it, and you don't think that they would have done if you'd gone,
I don't expect
No. no.
Maybe if you're, you know, like you were saying about skips, maybe the front owners might chip in for a skip.
Yeah, that,
rubbish.
yeah, that
So
sort
you
of
fall
thing.
down.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you take a man off,
Yeah.
like a car.
Sort of saying to people, this is the project, would you like to contribute? And if they say no, then we have to sort of say, well, we can't do it. Or that sort of, you know, togetherness in a way.
Yeah, you have a skip like once a year or whatever to get rid of all the rubbish that you couldn't recycle and things like that. You know, I guess you did chip in instead of you falling out.
Yeah.
Can I ask, if we're in the allotments committee, yeah, we have things decided for us by FES, what are you bothering? You know, I mean.
I think, yeah.
You know, we're supposed to know what we're doing here. If we feel that allotments would be better off if something was rolled over, why can't we do it? Because FES says we can't, or, you know, surely that's down to us.
We tell them no, you do.
I think that it has to go through, anything that is financial does have to go to FES, but then it can come back to the full council. Is that correct, Gina?
My FES decide for us, but we know what we decided isn't actually helping.
It basically, it was discussed at FES, and the reason why it's come here is to get your comments and your views, rather than them just dictate and say we'll put it up. It's giving you the chance to say possibly why you think it's the wrong decision to put it up, and you know why you think it's a bad idea.
I don't think
So
it's
this
so
is
much a
your
bad
chance,
idea
yeah.
to put it up. It's a bad idea that they decide what we've to do with our money. Well, their money.
I think though that this is the forum where we can say, hold on a minute, this is what we're not
Will
happy
it
with.
make any difference? Do you think?
Well, don't suppose it'd come back to the committee if they didn't want to hear what you wanted to say.
Right. So does one of us have to go and tell them?
I think the idea is we discuss it as a committee here and discuss the options, what we think the pros and cons are, etc., and then it's for sort of probably me and Eugene to work together
So it's not to set
to get
down
a report.
It's
to go back
just
to
a
FES.
suggestion now.
At the
from
moment, it's the
FES.
suggestion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got to decide whether we want to put our allotment fees up or whether we want to keep them the same or do something different.
The main thing is obviously if you don't put them up, you need to reduce your expenditure.
Yes,
So that's
yeah. And I think that that's something we've really got to look at.
I'm looking
What can we do?
at this expenditure, and of course, it's already now for 2023 nearly ending. And I think somebody said that repairs and maintenance, it suddenly jumped from £600-800 to 7.6k, and that surely isn't going to follow on next year.
The work will have been done,
The work's been done.
so hopefully it won't need to be done.
Yeah.
Um,
Similar for the barriers and fencing, that shot up £400 to 6,000. You know, and if we barriered and fencing, we're not going to need it again next year. Cool.
I think we've just got to sort of rein in a little bit what we're spending. Yeah,
Just to contribute a little bit, some of the expenditure we don't really have a we have to spend it. In that the council is responsible for perimeter fencing. If there's a gap or a defective perimeter fencing, we have to. We've said that's our responsibility. We have to do it. Similarly, like at Basil Street with the fencing there, you've got quite a big drop between two sides. We have to make sure that the fencing that there is fit for purpose, which is why we did some fencing work there. We had some other fencing work on Cookhouse, which was neighbouring on a private residence, which caused issues for that residence because it was falling over. The plot was overgrown. That was the one that we spent quite a lot of money on asbestos clearance as well. So there are many of the areas that we have spent haven't necessarily been areas where we had much discretion over, and that there was a degree of urgency in dealing with those matters. Hopefully we'll have resolved most of them, but there are still others out there. And as the allotments get older, the fencing, the structures, like Basil Street is getting older. At Sutherland Street, the fencing is getting older. It's fine now, but at some point we are going to need to repair it or reinstate it.
Do you look at maybe doing more preventive maintenance, i.e. choose one site per year and renew the fencing and do it that way, rather than wait until you categorically have to do it because there's issues? So it's more clever use of the budget. I mean, like I said, in previous years, it would be low, and then, like probably too low, and then it'd increase, and then it went back low again. So if you spending the same amount each year, and if you decide to do so much preventative maintenance per year, and maybe if you look at it that way, to try and even out your expenditure rather than it be
What's different? Sorry, what's different between barriers and fencing and repairs and maintenance?
Without looking at the invoices, it's difficult to say, but I would think things like paths would come under repairs and maintenance. I can't think of what else we would have done on repairs and maintenance at the moment. But the
decking,
I don't think we've done that much in terms of decking so far. But it's whatever's within the plot, I would have thought. I think, to be honest, we probably struggled with one of the things is, obviously, it would be advantageous if we could plan the maintenance ongoing, but quite a lot of the issues develop as people leave. So like this year, we had one where an elderly plot holder left. They hadn't been able to maintain the plot. They'd been a bit of a hoarder or whatever. I wouldn't like to say, but there was certainly more than just vegetables on the plot. So because that became vacant this year, we had the work to do this year. And it may be years that we don't have many plots coming back like that, but some years we may get one or two. And I think we probably use the maintenance repair category to help us out with the plot clearance where sheds or whatever are falling down, or there's asbestos work that needs to be removed. Because I don't think we've got a budget for asbestos in any of this. So it will probably be that which has bumped it up quite significantly.
and that's, I think, the sort of thing we might need to look at. How many of our sites have got asbestos? And then it could be factored in, couldn't it? Yeah, I mean, we was charging £50 for new renters. Do we want to put that up, or are we thinking £50 is sufficient? Or if we did add another £10 on it, would it make that great difference?
It's probably about 2 or 3 years ago. we have made, well, it does make an impact, but you are only talking probably under £1,000 a year. I would think probably more £600 to £400, depending on the number of lettings that year.
Anyway, it would be hoped that, I mean, obviously when you do plot inspections and things like that, and there are procedures for obviously people who aren't cultivating the plot as they should be. So you would hope that you wouldn't always get into that situation where if someone moved or that it would be in that bad.
Oh, Gina, I wish it was true.
But the idea is there are
Yes,
procedures
yeah,
in place
there
for
are
that.
procedures
so.
in place, yeah. So we have to make a decision.
Put it up.
You're into putting it on.
I don't think we can fiddle the other side of it. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean fiddle. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult to try and fit the jobs into the money we've got than it will be to get a little bit more money and know we can do the jobs.
I don't think we'll get that much more money in order to do the jobs.
But I would say, I'm not thinking now the way I was when I came in, but if we leave it another year, do we put it up 4 pence or do we put it up 8 pence next time?
If you put it at 4p, then you effectively gain 2,000, is it?
Yeah, that's this year. But as everything else is going up, would we put that up next year if we didn't do it this year? That's what I'm saying. You know, it's too far between, isn't it? It's a big jump.
I just don't know whether it's the right time.
No, but
would there ever be a right time?
Tourism for
How about you, Kevin?
I think, listen to what you've got to say. I think we're going to put it up somewhere. But where we put it. So we're increasing from 36 to 40.
It says 36 to 40. Yeah. That's correct, isn't it? Yeah.
37, 47 to
47 to 50.
or outside area.
For an outside area.
The 2 fee rates we've got are 36p per metre for people living in the town council boundaries and 47p per metre for people living outside the town council boundaries, on the basis that people outside the town council boundaries don't pay towards the Cone precept. I'm pretty sure that we actually have no plot holders currently living outside the town council boundaries, and we haven't allocated any plots to anyone living outside the town council boundaries, certainly in the 6 years I've been here.
Have you got, you might not have the numbers, but have you got the numbers of how much somebody on Sutherland Street pay now, and how much would it increase? Sorry. I'm just very aware that even £10 is a lot of money for some people. And we are trying to encourage people to be sustainable and to grow their own, and I know it is difficult times.
To be honest, it's probably cheaper for them to grow their own than it is to buy them in the supermarket.
I grow my spuds and various other things in my yard. I don't need a lot.
Yes.
It's certainly when people ask me about what the main thing I say to them it's got to be a hobby that you enjoy doing. You're not going to make any benefit on money wise.
No.
You're going to spend more time, especially if you consider your time, but also the money that you spend.
Yeah.
You do obviously get to know your own medical, you know what's behind them. But usually when our crops are ready, they're at the cheapest in the jobs anyhow.
Yeah.
So it's really for enjoyment. It is nice obviously to get some of the fruits.
Yes.
But money wise, it's like you say, you can go to the shops and get it cheaper.
No, you don't, no. Yes, yeah.
Final increase by £7.
£7.52. Which, yeah, per year.
I've got some spuds at home that are ready to go in. Do you want them?
Shall we go for a 3p increase over the number?
2 or 3 pence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, two or 3p.
I'll start to.
2. Okay, everybody in
I don't care, I
agreement?
haven't got one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2p.
I
Then
really
we've gone,
think it
we've
should
gone.
go up.
Yeah, can we have a proposer for 2p?
Oh, I'll propose.
Yeah, can we have a seconder for 2p increase?
It'll have to be you.
It doesn't.
be Alice.
I think we're all in agreement with that. Okay. Right, thank you. Allocations policy. And this is to consider amendments of the allotment allocation policy. Usually, would you just go through the changes perhaps, or yeah, just a few of the highlights?
Yes, I shall do my best. To be honest, it got rather complicated when we were looking at this. I think, excuse me, sorry. The reason for looking at doing changes to the allocation policy was really because we got a complaint in relation to someone being suspended from the waiting list for a period of time. And they were quite right to complain. They shouldn't have been suspended. Obviously, we rectified that as quickly as we could. But in doing that, I thought it really necessary that we perhaps look at the allocations policy again and make it a bit clearer as to what people can expect. So the major changes, I think, really is firstly that applicants must renew their applications for an allotment every year by the 30th of January. That's to ensure basically that the list is up to date. On average, you would expect that most people would start to receive offers once they've been on the list for about 2 years. And I thought there's no point looking at renewing. It's important that people renew their application so that you have your list current, but there's no point doing them at the 2-year stage only, because then it'll start getting confusing with when you've contacted them in relation to plot offers and when they should be renewing the plot. So they may speak to you about a plot offer and have a chat with you about that. They may think that they've renewed the application by doing that, but technically they haven't. So I think it's important to perhaps instill on everyone the need to renew the application, because we have some people who haven't contacted for, I think one case was for about 5 years. And then rung up and said, "Where am I on the waiting list?" Sorry, I didn't know they were still there. But obviously we keep a record of everyone on the waiting list. We have backdated records as well, so we can find people. But I think it's important to encourage people to contact us on a regular basis, and preferably at a not necessarily normally busy time of the year. We thought October time would be rent fees being sent out. July time would be really when we're doing the allotment awards. Around January, wouldn't want it before Christmas because people will be busy with that, but around, if we said by the 30th of January, I think it would be a set date, and it would be perhaps helpful to remind people of when that was to happen.
So will they get something in writing to say it should be Because I think everything should be in writing. That's why we've had so much confusion with these allotments for 16 years. Nothing was ever written down, it was all hearsay.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't tell you anywhere, does it?
Right. In answer to your question, the first impetus is for the applicant to renew their application.
Yeah.
If they would have to do that on paper, but what you're saying is, oh, you're going to write to them and tell them they have to renew their application? No. But what will happen is if they haven't renewed their application, whenever the allotment office has a look at it and they find that they haven't renewed their application, then the second provision that we've added into the allocation process is the agreement that the allotment officer may suspend an application for a period of, I think, 60 days, we said on this. So if someone didn't renew their application, they could be suspended for a period of 60 days, but to suspend them for 60 days, they would have to have a letter to advise them that they were going to be suspended because they hadn't renewed their application. So they would still be suspended for that period, but they would have that time in which to write in and say, I still want an allotment, and renew their application. If they weren't to write in, after that 60-day period, the provision is that they could be then removed from the waiting list. Because you have contacted them, well, the person has contacted them and they haven't responded and they haven't abided by their undertaking to renew. So there's 2 points really that it falls down now. So in putting the 60-day suspension in with it, we thought it also important that people would have the option to appeal against a decision to suspend their application, because they could be suspended for a number of different reasons. It could be that they hadn't renewed their application. It could be that they had refused a reasonable offer of accommodation. It could be that they owed money to the town council, less likely, I don't think, but it could be, or some other reason, but there are a set reasons why applicants could be suspended, and those are listed in the allocations policy. So there's a provision within the 60 days for the applicant to appeal that decision to the town clerk, who would then assess the situation and see whether they should have been suspended and whether they need to continue be suspended, or whether they need to renew or make a new application on the waiting list. I think what we've been trying to do all along really was we had numbers of situations where people were offered plots, and rather than come back and saying, I don't really like that plot because they might just ignore that offer and renew their application thinking, well, I'm not really interested in that, so I'm not going to renew it. And in those circumstances, we've spent time making the offer, and without them coming back to saying we haven't got it, it delays the whole process. And that's why previously the allotment committee has considered that if someone doesn't respond to an offer for whatever reason, that they should be suspended and removed from the waiting list. If someone refuses a reasonable offer of accommodation, they also should be suspended and potentially taken off the waiting list. So really what I've tried to do in these amendments, and I apologise because it is quite long-winded and quite wordy in many instances, more than I would like, is to try and make provision for that, but also protect the council in terms of that we need to administer the waiting list in an efficient way. And I think with the existing policy, it's not always clear what needs to happen. And so there's an element of judgment by myself or any allotment officer in terms of processing applicants on the waiting list, which maybe it should be a bit clearer in the allocations policy what is actually happening. For example, if someone is offered a plot, I wouldn't then offer them 5 other plots if I've got 5 other plots vacant. An applicant only gets 1 offer at one time, but it didn't actually say that in the waiting list. So that's a provision that I've added into the allocations policy. So there's lots and lots of little changes like that and wording to make sure that we're clear of when applicants might be suspended, to make sure that we're clear that applicants need a letter when they're suspended and not just left or whatever or anything like that. And also how we deal with the allocation process. Also that there's an understanding of what happens if someone is unhappy that they've been suspended, or if they're unhappy that they haven't been allocated a property, an allotment. So it sets out the appeals procedure where someone can appeal against a suspension, or if they're concerned, they think someone's been allocated a plot before them, they can't have personal details in relation to other applicants on the waiting list because that wouldn't be proper. But they do have, it would be reasonable for them to ask, if necessary, if there was reasonable grounds, for someone else to look into it to make sure that it had been allocated in accordance with the policy. So in addition to the appeals procedure, we've also got an allocation review procedure by the town clerk in with that. I'm sorry, Gina, I didn't mean to give you more work, but I think that's the way it would have to go. I wouldn't anticipate that there would be a lot of requests for review that couldn't be quite easily managed within the system, I would have thought. But I think there may be more appeals, I think, in terms of suspensions, because people are more likely to receive the notification and understand what it means if they didn't respond to that offer. But the long and the short of it is really to try and make the allocations process more efficient, but also cover the council in terms of its procedures, so that there is less grey areas as to what has happened and what can happen.
Thank you for all that work. Thank you. Okay, so next is number 9, and we're going to line.
We have to approve the.
Oh, we do have to approve it, don't we? Have we got a yes and yes? So we've got Kevin, and then we've got Pat. Thank you. We're all in agreement. Thank you for all that work. And now we're going to go on to number 9, livestock consents. I think you've had a few.
Yes, we have. We do have a register of people with livestock. It's as up to date as it can be because it was initially based on plot inspections. Obviously, plot holders change over time. What plot holders do on their plots change over time. So it's not necessarily 100% right, but it's certainly what we record as where the livestock was. At the end of December, I wrote to everyone on our livestock consent register, advising them that the consents originally given out by the allotment committee were due to expire on the I can't remember if it's the 31st or the 1st of January 2023. That's been a long-standing commitment or thing that the committee had lined 5 years ago, I think, when I first started. So it's not something that we've taken out of the blue. It has been long-standing. So I wrote to all the plot holders who had consent for livestock previously, and I have received now 5 consent requests in relation to livestock, and those are for plot 1 Temple Street to keep 6 chickens, for plot 3A Temple Street to keep 6 chickens, for plot 18 to 19 Alkincoats to keep 6 chickens, and for plots 5, 6 and 7 George V to keep pigeons and geese, and plot 8 Broken Banks to keep chickens. I think we've said 5 chickens at Broken Banks. There's a number of those which are they are racing pigeons. They're not for consumption.
No, yes. 150 racing pigeons.
I believe it's 150 racing pigeons and 5 geese. Because I have a letter from the plot holder saying that it's 100. Well, I suspect he may only count them at the start of the year because I think they breed them during the course of the breeding season. Some of them don't make it to the end of the breeding season, but I think they end up with more. And then they sort of like sort it out before winter, really. So his actual numbers will go up and down, but he's applied for consent for 150. My understanding is that there is a long-standing undertaking for people to keep chickens and fowl on allotment plots for personal consumption. There isn't any provision for chickens. However, he did approach the committee. Pigeons.
Yeah.
He did approach the committee some time ago, and I think the committee was respectful of the historic nature of pigeon keeping in the area. What I would suggest doing is actually arrange for inspections of the plots that have requested consents, particularly in relation to chickens, to make sure they have the trestle feeders and that they've got suitable conditions for the animals, and also that the rest of the plot are being maintained to an adequate standard. I think we should probably apply that to all the plots that have requested. I'm proposing that possibly Thursday, the 6th of April might be a good day to do those inspections for myself. I don't know if members of the committee would like to join me on those inspections for those 5 plots. That's specifically for people who've requested to keep livestock.
Yes, it will depend if it's in the afternoon.
And we can make it in the afternoon if that's better for you.
Yeah.
Right. I think just on that, I think obviously, given that is a relative understanding that people will want to keep fowl on allotment sites, I think what is critical for that is that the plots are being maintained to a satisfactory standard already, and that if plots aren't being maintained, that they receive notification of that and have chance perhaps before the next allotment committee meeting to make good any. Sorry. Yes, that we do the inspections. That key to those inspections is that the condition of the existing plots that are being maintained to an adequate standard of cultivation. If they're not, then we need to send the letters out so that by the time of our next allotment committee meeting, they have the chance to do any necessary improvements to the plot, and they can have their consents considered at that time. I think whether or not you want to agree that between the 3 of us, we can agree consents for those that do pass that criteria in the meantime, rather to avoid them having to delay until the next meeting before those consents are given. So just to be clear, the ones where there are some concerns over the conditions of the plots, these would be referred back. They'd have a letter and be referred to the next meeting. The ones that satisfy the conditions for keeping the livestock as outlined in our policy, and also satisfy the condition of the plots as according to the allotment agreement, could receive consent on the agreement of this committee.
So the government have to wait a month.
That's why I'm suggesting that if we inspect and everything's tickety-boo, we can give consent then rather than wait.
You've been around
I'm afraid we couldn't just do it now because that wouldn't really be fair. But we know that as soon as we came to your plot, then there wouldn't be a problem. So
it's not fair anyway. There's only 5 applied for permission. How many of the registered keep chickens?
that was a question I was going to ask. Yes.
There's only 5 plots on the income at this moment allowed to keep chickens because they've applied for permission.
Well, at the moment,
At least 3.5 to 4 months, or God forbid there's anything up for another meeting, it could be next September, it could be this time next June before we get permission. We need a lot more meetings. It used to be every month. Oh,
I do agree with that. Yes, yeah, but we'll be able to address that in the next sort of council meetings, won't we? Because we usually have a timetable of committee meetings, but of course, the more meetings we have, the more expensive it becomes to the council, because obviously these lovely people have to be paid. But what we're saying, Bill, is that once we come and visit your plot on the 6th of April, everything will be fine. And you would get your consent, then you wouldn't have to come to another meeting in order to have it officially ratified.
what I'm saying is, I think did you get it? I'm paying to keep them. You're not paying the way. I just want, you know, for them to pay for themselves.
Yes.
So to wait another, probably another 3 months before I get permission to go and get some new chickens.
But what we're saying is that you don't have to wait for that. As soon as we've visited you on the 6th of April, then you can go out and buy your new chickens.
I was under the impression that when I came to this meeting tonight, I would get permission to keep the chickens and I could go and get my new ones on Saturday. That's what I was led to more or less to believe. We've applied for permission and now we're having to wait longer for permission, and I don't think it's good enough.
What do other people think? Because this is a committee.
Meetings, we've got to talk about it first before we all decide, and it's best if we all decide to do a certain thing, because that's what committees are. But are you on this list?
Yeah.
Temple Street.
I was the first one. Yeah.
Right.
And Sam is next door but one. She's applied as well. 2 letters, I believe.
If they're ready for that, then go out and get some more chickens.
But I don't have permission.
You've got, yeah. Well, get these 6 in pot. Sorry.
Basically, we're talking 2 weeks, aren't we? So
Yeah.
it's so, you know, it's only 2 weeks.
What I'm saying is it's not
Yeah.
good enough. We've had this now since last year. We knew it were coming. If we'd have had a meeting in December, it could have been done then. So we've all had to wait an extra 3 months, and now we're having to wait an extra, all right, only 2 weeks. It's not good enough.
Yeah,
I want an
appreciate
answer
that.
tonight.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
what I'm here for.
the answer obviously is that we have to be fair for everybody. We have to look at everybody's plots. We have to see that the animals are being kept properly, and then make that decision then, in my view. But
Well, I can vouch for myself and I can also vouch for Sam.
okay, yeah. So that's what we will do.
Not happy.
Have chickens. Can I go out and buy some?
Yeah.
Oh, on top of these 6.
No.
No, you've got to get rid of your 6, I think, to keep 6.
Right. Okay.
So those chickens have got another 2 weeks to live.
Oh.
I'll be on for a big.
She
season,
says
won't
being a vegetarian.
They're hybrids.
I? All right.
Like an egg in it. When they're young.
Sorry about that, Bill, but
No,
I
not
think
happy.
that is
Not
what
happy.
we've got.
But I don't think the rest of them will be happy either.
Sometimes we do have to make difficult decisions. Yeah. Okay, so anything else about the livestock? We're going to visit the sites and then we'll make the decisions on that. Okay. And yes, we need to see all the ones that haven't actually asked for consent as well. Land transfer.
Yes. Well, there's two areas of land transfer that we have been working on. One is the general transfer of allotment land from Pendle Council, and the other is the transfer of the access path for the South Valley plots. We have progressed with obtaining plans, land registry compliant plans for the land transfer, and unfortunately, when our solicitors looked at that, there appears to be some conflict in relation to a small parcel of land which may belong to Pendle Borough Council. We're not 100% sure yet where this conflict, if there is a conflict, is situated. It is possibly between, we know that there's a partial issue near our end of the access track, which doesn't affect access because it's to the side. We suspect but don't know for sure whether the area of land in question may be the bit between the two garages at each side of the exit to the allotment track. We believed that to be Marrow Developments. It still might be Marrow Developments, but the solicitor seems to think that there is an issue that we need to address, and Gina's made inquiries with the solicitor to see if they can identify exactly what the issue is with that. So we don't know what that is at the moment, but we'll need to come back to you on that. But otherwise, everything is progressing quite soundly on that. In relation to the general allotment land transfers, that is still proceeding as it was previously. We've had some clarification, or there were some concerns over George V allotments because of the requirement of fields in trust, to that the signage to the George V playing fields is maintained. The actual signs is on the actual signage is on the playing field and not on the allotment side. So we have no signage to maintain. But I think the Fields in Trust were keen to ensure that some was maintained them, even if it wasn't us. And I think we've done some clarification of that with Fields in Trust.
It's for Pendle Borough Council, in that I think the heraldic panels that are set in stone, that we were under the impression, well, according to the deed, that we would have to maintain those at our cost. However, we have had written confirmation from Pendle Borough Council that they wouldn't expect us to do anything. So
That's continuing, really. And hopefully we'll get to a conclusion soon. It has taken a long time, and there have been little things along the way which have delayed it, but I think it is just a process of working through, unfortunately. But at this point in time, there aren't any alarm bells ringing about any problems, I don't think, in relation to that.
I think we were still waiting for the plan for Sutherland Street and River Street to be separated.
Yes, we were, weren't we? Yes, yeah. Only on the basis that there were reasons why we didn't want to take on River Street, potential reasons, not necessarily actual reasons, but because of the difficulties of that site, the steepness of the slope, and other issues which historically have been involved in that area. Several years ago, it was decided that site wouldn't be one that we would take on.
Gina, can I just ask, how many allotment plots do we actually own?
One, I think.
21 sites, probably around 150 different. We own the Notts Lane and South Valley site.
So Notts Lane and South Valley, and everything else is still under Pendle. And when did we actually start to manage them? Okay. Right. And do you think we might get them? Was it before 2016? Yeah. And do you think this might be resolved within the next month?
Probably not within the next month, no. But
Within the next 10 years?
well, hopefully it will be within before the end of this year.
Oh,
I think
excellent.
we should have
Yeah,
come to
Yeah. So you're looking at the end run now.
yeah. We can see light at the end of the tunnel.
Brilliant. Okay, now thank you. Right. Anything else on that? Plot inspections.
Yes, I've drafted a provisional timetable for plot inspections to commence the inspections in June, subject to the officer being in place. It would be useful to know if members wanted to accompany them on those inspections. Obviously, this is what we're planning to make sure that these things happen, but obviously it is subject to a little bit of uncertainty, but this is what we want to do. And I think I've provided a list of dates for those inspections somewhere. So we'd originally grouped them into a number of areas. So what I'm proposing that on the 1st of June, that we do Alkin Coates and White Grove, which is all around Alkin Coates Park. It's approximately 37 plots in total. The last inspection highlighted that there were 6 on Alkin Coates that were of concern at that time. So there's certainly 6 if you were wanting to focus on that potentially those 6 might be ones to definitely have a look at. Come what may. The next area on the 8th of June, I've got Broken Banks, Carry Lane and Granville Street, a total of 30 plots. We found previously on Broken Banks there was 2 plots which were not cultivated to an acceptable standard, 2 on Carry Lane and 1 on Granville Street. So I get to these 5 plots there that of particular concern that you'd want to have a look at more closely. On the 15th of June, we're looking at Basil Street, Sutherland Street, River Street and Notts Lane and South Valley. There were these 36 plots in total. It could be quite a lengthy day. There were 8 plots of concern at that time to focus on. And then on the 22nd of June, we have Carr Road, Temple Street, Montague Street and New Oxford Street. Quite a lot of these have got limited access because they're accessed through property. So that one probably will need some pre-planning on letters to plot holders to provide access. So there's 25 on that day. And then on the 29th of June, we've got Castle Road, Cookhouse, Highgarth and George V, total of 20 properties, of which 5 were of concern last time. After that, I think we will be starting doing the inspections for the allotment awards. So if there's any particular councillors who would like to look at plots in a particular area or all the areas.
Can I just, am I on? Yes. Can I just make a little suggestion? It seems to be that we start off with just looking at sites rather than actual problem plots. And those sites that are lower down on the list, their problem plots are just going to be staying as a problem plot. And I just wondered whether if we concentrated on the actual problems rather than the sites, it might get through those issues a little bit quicker. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Well, I was thinking the 6th of April, we're looking at the ones in yellow. But what about all the others? They've got chickens.
Oh, we're not really talking about the chickens. No. Yeah.
We take when we
Yeah. I'm just thinking that rather than just concentrating on aside. We want to look at the plots that were a problem, and otherwise there's still going to be a problem 4 weeks later. And I don't know what people think about that.
They already know.
We've got a list of the problem plots. Yeah. I mean, this is something that we could perhaps discuss as a group of those who are going to be going round. Yeah. Pat, would you like to go and visit sites? Yeah. Kevin? Yeah. Okay.
You've got Temple Street at the bottom of the list again, and how many years have I been complaining about plot number 2?
That's why I think it's
7 or 8
yeah.
years I've been complaining about it, there's nothing being.
That's why I don't think we should leave it right to the end. I think we should concentrate on those problem plots.
When we talk about plot number 6 of April, and the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's wintered since then, so it's even worse.
Yeah, so I think that would be a better idea to do the problem ones rather than the sites.
You need to look at it last week. And I don't think Eugene's had word back yet. Somebody did have a look at it.
Oh, that sounds promising.
No,
Oh, it's not. Oh.
And this is what we've been putting in the last 8 years.
I think people look at the plot, decide it's too much, and then go away.
They want to move on to mine.
Okay, so we'll sort that plot inspection timetable out, looking at the problem plots rather than the sites. Allotment awards.
Yes, I've done a provisional timetable for the allotment awards. What I would suggest is that I think some of the difficulty we had last year, not that we had a lot of difficulty, was that we had very good ambitions for the awards in terms of having a question panel and other activists and getting people to judge and stuff like that. But unfortunately, there were difficulties in doing that. And what I'm suggesting really this time round is that we focus on doing a basic award using perhaps the same format that we did last year, and that if we've got resources of people offer, actually build on top of that, but actually start off now so that we have things in place, so that we can get the awards evening books, we can get the preparation of letters for inviting people to enter and all that sort of stuff, and just go on the basis that it'd be the judging will be at this moment in time would be by a member or members of the allotment committee, unless at a later date the allotment committee decide that they're going to have a different judge, do it that way. But I think it's important to get quite a bit of it sorted out early.
Eugene, how many applicants did we have last year?
We average, whatever we've done with the competition, we average about 7 or 8 applicants.
Do people think that the amount of time that we put into it, the amount of officer time that is put into it, the expense is worthwhile for 6 or 7 people, and it's usually the same people? Personally, I'm not sure it is.
They're happy to go and play on the allotments and do what they want down there, but they won't go that little bit further and get things ready to show everybody what they've done. There are probably 4 or 5 people that do it because they want to, and then they try to put them more in, but nobody else wants to do it. You know, I'm really proud of you guys. Well, I'm proud of what I'm growing me back. No, never mind of me a lot. And there's
so should we say, that we do not need to have that officer time taken up by this? What, the 7 that usually?
When I got down rated for having a big water barrel, only half full, you won't catch me entering again. Because I've been using it to walk the club. I'm just sitting over from Nelson. I'm blocking it off a point. Oh,
I mean, photo competition, that's quite nice, perhaps. A photo competition, that'd be quite nice. So, and wouldn't take a lot of time, especially if us councillors were prepared to do things. Yes.
But you remember back in the day, we used to have a big show at the uni, didn't we?
Yeah.
Gardening show. Yeah. Every year, it was solid, you couldn't get it. There were that many people around. I presume we've got even more allotments now than we had. But no, it's the bother.
No, no. So I would propose that we do not have the allotment awards next year.
You just want the photograph.
A photograph competition, a photo competition.
So we're not getting the Marathon Bakery to. Oh no. Oh no.
No, we won't have an evening. We can spend the £200 that we owe. So is anybody seconding that proposal, that we don't have a I've proposed it. You seconded it. Okay. Okay. So allotment updates.
Right. We've one of the things was the tap on Elkin Courts, which I think we've already probably covered sufficiently. We had recently this week a complaint regarding bonfires on Temple Street. I did advise a complaint that plot holders were permitted to have bonfires, provided obviously they didn't cause nuisance, and that they would be ending at the end of this month, basically.
Well,
It wasn't you, no, it wasn't. There's an issue which is developed over access to the Cookhouse allotments. 3 of the plots on that site were accessed via a Pendle Council garage site. I think you'll remember falling over there last year. Not the best access at all. I'm probably not really reasonable to expect plot holders to negotiate or that bar to get into the site. One of the new plot holders tried to get a greenhouse delivered, and unfortunately they refused to deliver it because there wasn't close enough access to the site, and they weren't going to take the glass over that bar. I saw Pendle's Property Services last Friday, and we had a look at it, and I've made a formal request that we are allowed to give keys for access to the plot holders on request. The likelihood is that there would be a significant deposit for those keys, because firstly they're expensive keys because they're security keys, and secondly it will be important that they are returned to us. At the moment, our key deposit is set at £20, and I don't think that will be. I don't get keys returned for £20 deposits at the moment, so I think we do need to look at increasing that. And also, there's a similar problem with Elkin Courts in the sense that we've just run out of keys for the bollard access, and it will cost us at least £10 per key to get those cut, and if the deposit is only £20, it's not that we want to make money, but we don't want to have to spend £10 every now and again to get new keys. So I would suggest that we look at increasing the key deposits, possibly to up to about £50. But that will depend on the committee being in agreement to that, and they'd have to propose it really, because it's a change to the fee levels. For security keys, I would suggest, rather than just standard keys.
The key costs you about £10, but then you're going to go actually get it cop, you know, so it's costing a lot more than that for each key, isn't it, really?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
How much is it at the moment? Did you say 20? No. But you'd only be asking those new people.
Yes, I mean, we've got a record of all deposits paid for existing keys, so they would get whatever deposit they paid if they handed the key back. The problem is that very rarely do we get keys handed back for any site. But it will be more important for Cookhouse because we're not authorised to cut those keys. We have to go to Pendle, and if we have to go to Pendle on a regular basis to get replacement keys, they'll be less than happy. Just general concerns really over fly tipping and gates being left open. So they want to ensure that people were being responsible, which I think if we were doing it ourselves, we'd want that.
So if somebody new came to Cookhouse, they would be asked for the £50 for our site, and then £50 for a new key.
That's right, but that would be a deposit.
And that would be the deposit. Well, I mean, they'd go into it with their eyes open, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be that we're raising, but £50 is a lot. The pocket's empty.
Then you might get the keys returned then.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe for £20, £10, 20, yeah.
what do you think?
40 or 50.
I was thinking 40 actually.
40, yes.
Double it,
Yeah,
I'll propose 40.
and I'll second it.
brilliant. Thank you.
Just to let you know that the town clerk is currently dealing with an appeal by a waiting list applicant who was suspended, which I mentioned previously. We hope to be able to respond to that shortly. As I said, they shouldn't have been suspended, unfortunately, but it's just one of those things. And we try to rectify it as quickly as possible once it had been identified. A number of allocations have taken place since the last meeting, which include 3 plots, plots on Carry Lane and plots on Broken Blanks, and one on New Oxford Street. 3 plots are currently on offer and are accepted, but we're all waiting for sign updates. These plots are located on River Street, Temple Street and Sutherland Street. One plot has had a notice served on it for non-cultivation and plot fee arrears. That notice will expire on the 30th of April, and that's on Broken Banks. I already have a plot holder who's very keen to take that plot up on the expiry of that notice. In addition to that, we have a further 5 plots awaiting allocation, which include 2 on Carry Lane and 2 on Broken Banks and 1 on Alking Coats, which I'm going to ask Gina to have a look at before it's actually allocated. Members may or may not be aware the allotment contract officer is retiring at the end of next month. So the process is in place for appointing a new allotments and contracts officer, and we will be doing that as quickly as possible. I've agreed with Gina that I'm going to do some additional time once that person's in place, just to ensure that they're aware of any potential situations that they need to be aware of. So I'm hoping that we can do what we can to make it a smooth transition, but there will be there will be some delay, but we will do our best to minimise it. I think that's about it for me.
Thank you.
It's my time. The season has changed. Yes, I'm going whilst I can still walk.
Eugene, can I just ask you about the bonfire? Was the complainant happy, and the person that was undertaking the bonfire, were they?
I wouldn't say that the complainant was happy,
No.
but I think there's a balance to be kept between what people should expect to happen on allotment sites and what they may expect to happen. She had genuine concerns. It put washing out, and it affected the washing. We do in the guidance say, please make sure that people aren't doing washing, and if it's a hot day, then
Yeah, that's fine.
if she's not putting appropriate stuff on the fire, then that would be an issue, whatever time of year it was. So that
It finishes Thursday next Thursday is the end of the burning season.
Next Thursday.
28th, 29th.
yeah.
Well, it's the end, yeah. Oh, yes, tomorrow, then, yeah. Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
November.
Contention between 29th of September, which I've got in mind, or October, which Judy has, or even November. And it finishes on the 29th of March.
Right, that's okay.
Which
You know
if
where I start.
most of us have got September till March.
Right, okay. Items for a future month agenda. Where we won't have Eugene, unfortunately. Anybody got anything that, well, actually, we might not have me or any of the councillors that are sitting around this table. Yeah. So we will wait and see what happens in the coming months. And yeah, we should do have an allotment party. Yeah. Okay, so the date and time of the next meeting will be?
It will be decided by the full council when the meeting's scheduled, but it's likely to be sometime in June.
Yeah, and we want to see whether we can get a few more, don't we? And a few more councillors, because the more councillors we have, then if there's a few apologies, then it won't mean that we can't have the meeting. So we need to encourage more councillors onto the committee. But it is. Yeah. And the environment, and the environment, and the environment. Yes. Right, so we'll close the meeting now, and thank you everybody for attending.